Annie Brown dies in the first sentence, in the first scene, but the point of the book, and I think the success of the novel is that she's the most alive person in it.
Welcome to our latest episode of Book Reporter Talks To. I'm really happy to have our guest today, Anna Quindlen, and we're going to be talking about her latest novel after Annie, her 10th novel. Oh my gosh, 10 novels. Our Book Reporter reviewer, Eileen Zimmerman-Nickel, had this to say about it. Anyone who has lost someone precious will relate to these characters' grief, heartbreak, and ultimate resilience. It's a trip on a road paved with that pathos, but it's one well worth taking. And with that intro, welcome, Anna. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you, Carol.
So this is your 10th novel, but I'm sure that it's the first where we have a character that dies in the first sentence, and everything kind of evolves right on the first page. Was that always the start of the book? Did you always know, boy, that's where we're going in?
It was, and it was sort of terribly unexamined, so that once the book was published and I went on book tour and talked to readers, which I love, people would say to me, didn't you think it was chancy to have the main character die in the first sentence? And I thought, I should have thought that was chancy, but somehow I didn't. I mean, because Annie Brown dies in the first sentence, in the first scene, but the point of the book, and I think the success of the novel is that she's the most alive person in it. I mean, you don't ever feel like she's not there. She's there constantly. She's there in every page, on every page. She's there because she's there constantly in the memory and the hearts and the minds of the people who loved her.
Yeah, yeah. And the way you do it, it's told from the viewpoints of her oldest daughter, Allie, her husband, Bill, and her best friend, Annemarie, who has been her friend for life. And they're very, very different. Did you ever think about having others, or was it always these three can tell her story well enough?
Actually, originally, I started to write the book in the first person from Allie's point of view. And I very quickly realized that there were limitations to a 13-year-old looking at any situation, and particularly thinking about her mother's death. And that's the point at which I thought, really, this triangle is kind of ideal, because they're seeing the same woman, they're seeing lots of the same events, but it's a little bit like the blind men and the elephant. One of them sees her this way, one of them sees her that way, one of them assesses her life in a very positive fashion, another, Annemarie, who's kind of a tough case, not so much. And so that idea that all of us, if you brought our family and friends together, would be made up of these component parts that taken together is who we are, as opposed to just one person looking at who we are.
Yeah, I mean, the children will see this is the mother who organizes the house. The friend's going to see the ride and die person. This is the person I go to for everything. And the husband's going to see this wife and then realize how much she really did, like when she's
Exactly.
gone. He's going to see that's difference. I could picture the house, the kitchen, the sofa where Allie works for her father to come home, and everything's a little shabby. It's not like completely put, like, it's not actually probably what Annie wanted. It is what she has, and she's making the best of it. And I feel like with these details, we know a lot about the family quickly. Like we can see this is the linoleum's on the floor. It's a little puckered in a couple of places. And I feel like setting that scene set them up so well. And it's like you're training as a journalist. Let's set the scene. Let's everybody see. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, well, I think I always try to do that in novels. If the reader isn't living in the book, then I feel like I haven't done what I set out to do. I mean, those are the kind of books I love to read. I don't like look at me fiction. I don't like clever tap dancing. Oh, isn't this, can I spin a sentence? I like a book where I start it, and the next thing I know, I'm living in another time, in another place with other people. I'm living and walking around in it. And I really feel like those are the details that that brings a reader in and makes them absorb everything that you felt. So those are the things I try to do. I try to do with every novel.
Yeah, it's a little scuffed here. It's not perfect there, but it's home. And that's exactly, where it is. There's one point during the funeral, and actually read this part where Allie says nice things about everybody's telling Allie nice things about her mom. And she remarks, no one's saying the word dead. Like no one's saying this is what she really is. She's dead. She's not this person. And are dead people perfect? She's trying to think in her head. Did they never make any mistakes? Because everything is positive about the person. And it made me think of every wake and every funeral that I've been to. And they're all these words, but the situation stays the same. And she keeps coming back to, that's my mother over there. My mother's not coming back. And I think it's a very grown up observation from her. But sometimes we get the best observations from kids who haven't done these things before or just going, well, why don't you just say she's dead? Why don't we talk
Well,
about that?
because she hasn't learned the kind of obfuscation that adults bring to the table, that
Mhm.
you don't talk this way, that you don't speak ill of the dead. She doesn't want anybody to speak ill of Annie. She wants them to be realistic about the three-dimensional person, so vivid, sometimes really smart-mouthed, not suffering fools gladly, that her mother actually was, and she can feel her almost in days being turned into this kind of plaster saint with
Mhm.
all of her sharp edges sanded off. I would say that the single most autobiographical tweak in the book is I hate euphemisms for dead.
Mhm.
I hate passed away. I hate they're gone. I just feel like, let's be honest about what goes on here.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things I tried to do in the book is say, we're not honest because we're overwhelmed by grief and loss and distress at the situation, when instead we should feel all those things and then be able to say to ourselves, but she lives.
Right.
She
Right.
lives in our minds. I mean, that's why she's so vivid in the book, because none of the three of them can go more than a couple of hours without hearing Annie talk or seeing something that reminds them of her. I mean, in the crisper drawer in the fridge, there's a half an onion turning to mush, and nobody wants to throw it away because Allie and her father and even Annemarie realize that the person who cut that onion in half was Annie. Now,
Mhm.
at some level, that's completely silly. At another level, it shows us how the power of love transcends death. Maybe that's what we mean by heaven, that they're
Mhm.
still around in our hearts and minds in that wonderful way.
Yeah, in that caring kind of way. And we can sit there and they're bringing something to us, even though they're gone. Yes, they are. They're dead. Like it, and it is that way. Also, I'm of Italian background, and usually when you go in, if the casket's open, oh, he looks good. She looks good. They did a good job. And it's just like so interesting to me. And my mom's casket was closed, and I remember going, there is no way that you want everybody walking up going, how does she look? Oh, she looks good. Da, da, da. And it's somebody who's dead. It's just like that crazy thing that ends up happening so many times at
Well,
funeral.
so my father had this file called his funeral file, and every time I went and had lunch with him, he'd take out the funeral file, baby. I want to make a change to the funeral file. And at one point he said, no wake. And I was like, no wake? And he goes, no wake. We had a 2-night wake. We cut it to one, no wake. I went to a wake the other night. It was like a cocktail party, and the person was like a centerpiece. I'm not doing that. And on the one hand, I thought he was completely right. And on the other hand, I was sort of amazed that he got that, given the generation that he was from. So no wake.
No way, no way. But I did love that the bottle was slipped into the coffin of rosé. I love that touch. When my mother-in-law passed away, we slipped in a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc from her favorite Sauvignon Blanc was put in. So I was like, oh, I'm so glad to see that somebody was going, this is what she really wanted in there. This is what she'd really want to be taking with her. That was a perfect little touch, let's say.
Thank you.
So, we also in time, we go back and like Annie and Annemarie are friends. They're on this girls' trip. They're planning the rest of their lives. And all of a sudden, Annie's pregnant. And the whole life changes like that. It's like, I'm going to have a baby. I'm going to get married. I'm going to move ahead. And Annemarie is just like jolted because my friend is going to have a totally different life. She's got a commitment to the baby and all these kinds of things. And there's something beautiful there about their friendship, though, staying on and having to find, I found it was like an album, a new groove, and how to go into a new groove to work for them. Is that what you were seeing as you were writing the split of their lives?
Oh, sure, because most of our female friendships, particularly the ones that have lasted for decades, have had their ups and downs because
Mhm.
of changes in our life circumstances. But I think it's Annie who has to be patient with Annemarie, because Annemarie is picking at her all the time about how, you really should want more than this,
Yeah,
and you're
yeah,
having another one, that sort of thing.
yeah.
And Annie is kind of like, okay, you want some things. I wanted some of those same things, but here's the hand I'm dealt, and I'm happy. I'm happy. I mean, Annie is a person who, she wants a bigger kitchen. She'd like her own house. She'd like a lot more money. But when she looks around at the four kids and her husband and looks around the nursing home where she works as an aide, she kind of loves her life. And
Mhm.
Anne Marie's one of those people who has that internal engine where she always wants more, more,
Mhm.
more, more. And
Yeah.
I think that Annie, not during her life, but I think Annie in her death teaches Anne Marie something really valuable about what you leave behind and
Mhm.
how when you die, you don't leave behind a bigger house or a
Mhm.
nicer kitchen. You
Mhm.
leave behind the love of the people who loved you. And that's why I think Annie teaches some of her most valuable lessons to Anne Marie
Mhm.
after, in fact, she's dead.
Yeah, because she sits there and says, well, wait a second, what's going on here? How do I relate to this family now? How do I
Yeah.
go over to this house? Who am I to this family? Am I an outsider? Am I the happy aunt? Who am I to these people? Especially the little boys. Like, how do you relate to little boys? The girls, like, I deal with, but becomes the whole thing. But Annie has saved Anne Marie in her life, and she saved her when her drug use was out of hand. And I feel like she's still watching over her in some ways because every time she goes to grab another drink, every time she goes, don't you dare do that. I'm not there to fix it this time, you know?
Yep. Yep. I mean, I think probably for most of the rest of her life, Anne Marie is going to imagine Annie sitting shotgun in the car
Yeah,
and saying to her, yeah, don't do that.
no, don't
Don't
do
do that.
don't.
And having a friend, not only who will do that, but who you will accept that from
Mhm.
as a loving gesture is an enormous gift.
Somebody that you can listen to advice from, or they can text you and say, I have a news update, and you know to drop everything and call. You
Yep.
know that that's like you're saying something there, and whatever I'm doing is less important. And it's being there for you is the most important thing. And I think she's got to learn that where am I going to be there for this family now? What am I going to, am I buy the kids shoes? Like, what's my role? What's my, thinking about?
There's that really sad moment early in the book where Anne Marie reads the obituary
Mhm.
and realizes that she's not listed as a survivor,
Right.
and yet she feels like she was as much a sister to Annie, and Annie was as much a sister to her as
Mhm.
exists on Earth, and I just really felt that for her.
Mhm. And it's true because it's you, what's your role? And then she sits there and goes, but I was the best friend. Can I like edit this for me to be the best friend? Everybody also talks about the year of firsts, like, oh, you're going to go through the year of first, the first Easter, the first Christmas. And I remember one friend finishing the first year when her husband passed away, and she goes, and now I'm doing year two. It's not going to change. And it's almost like everybody says the first will go through them, and then something different's going to happen. She goes, but what's going to be different except doing it again? And I thought that you really, put that out well as you're capturing the day to day that happens, not just the holidays that most people think about. It's getting the kids shoes, getting the kids off to school, not being late, all those kinds of things. And I think the details are what makes the book so special. Were you going back and working on those or was it fluidly coming out?
No, I was pretty much living in it so that
Mm.
those things were accessible to me. I could see and hear and smell them. And for me, that's the kind of fiction that really makes real life. There are really pared down writers whose work I really admire, but you know, I cut my reading teeth on Dickens when I was
Mhm.
pretty young. And I've always been guided by that sense that if you can describe the leaves on the trees and the mica in the sidewalk, you can make the reader be there, and the reader being there is not half the battle, it's almost the entire battle.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like the first scene, you see the mashed potatoes, you see the gravy, you see everything plopped on the floor. And it's that visual, visceral kind of sense of this is what's going on. You're in the book, by guys, you're right here. You know, Allie calls her mom's phone to hear her voice. And I was thinking of that a lot of she just picks up and she just wants to hear what her mother's saying, like leave a message, like, hello, can I do that? And I'm realizing today, and I think about this a lot, how much fewer correspondence there is. We email each other, we write notes, maybe send a card. Sometimes don't even do that anymore. Maybe just send an email. And I'm thinking about how less of a trail they have than the boxes of cards that I probably have up in the attic because I think I save everything that will give you some kind of a lift at some point of this is from your mom. And I was thinking she's calling her mom just to hear her voice. You know, there's
Well, they have a different trail. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I wrote a book that was published 2 years ago, I guess, called Write for Your Life.
Mhm,
And one whole section of it was about writing letters and how invaluable letters are to historians, but also how invaluable letters are to us. And
mhm,
how if we can leave something written and really thought through in that way that things that we write down are, as opposed to a text,
mhm,
that would be such a gift to our family, to the people who come after us. On the other hand, the almost the tangibility of what they have in modern kids is really interesting to me. For example, when I die, my kids will be able to call up something like this,
mhm,
and it will it will almost be like I'm alive. I mean, you know, they will see me talking and gesturing in ways that feel really familiar to them. And
mhm,
that's one of the things that I was trying to capture with her calling to listen to the phone message that uh, I have absolutely no ability to hear my mother's voice.
right,
I can
right.
see her in still pictures, but there's something about that is like she's gone, the person in
Mhm,
still pictures. So on the one hand, I would love it if everybody wrote more letters, but on the other hand, that ability to pull up this kind of almost three-dimensional
mhm.
person, this almost avatar, I think is going to be really interesting in the years to come.
Yeah, and and also people these days. I mean, I didn't capture my kids' every move. I mean, I did it like a birthday party. This and now we've got complete documentation on film of everything that happens. Here's the baby coming home, baby first day, second day. And it's so interesting to me because my kids, even though they're, let's say, 29 and 34 right now, they don't have that kind of a visual history. We have we have pictures, we have video, but it's not where kids are today, where it's a living movie of your life all day long and it's
Well, I
shared to everybody.
appreciate you saying this as a mother of more than one, because my experience is with number one, I have a complete baby book and I have many, many photographs, and I have his little hat in a box. And with number two, his name and his birth weight are in the baby book. And I think maybe one of the curls cut off when he had his first haircut. And I'm not sure number 3 had a baby book.
We're dead on. The first one had a lot of things, but I have to admit I missed a lot. Like I didn't miss like, the footprint and all these kinds of things. I never like did. So we've got gaps. The second one has got his name in the book and that's it. And we only had 2. And
Yeah.
here's the crazy thing. My 2 were both born in January, 5 days apart. And they wore the same size clothes. So think about for holidays, you put them in the same outfit. You did everything the same. So I sent my younger one to school with a picture of him. And on the back, it said Greg, like 1995. And it was the older son. It was not the younger one. And he goes back and he goes, Mom, I know we looked alike, but look on the back. That's not me. And I was like,
You
okay, that's
know, we all did the best we could.
I said, but you were wearing the right clothes. That was the outfit you were wearing. We're totally cool on this. But there are also boys, and I was cleaning out the attic because we have this attic with everything in it. And people say, are you going to downsize? I said, yeah, in 10 years. Like it would take me forever just to do this. And I also caution parents, like every piece of paper they bring home, you don't need to save. Like you can just like throw it out. So we have all this stuff upstairs and we're going through, and I was like, oh my gosh, we have all these things. Don't you want to save this? And they wanted nothing. So I'm making them boxes that I think they'll care about later, because right now they just torch the whole thing, couldn't care less. And I'm like, but you're going to want this.
There's
Show
this
them later.
great Instagram account where this woman pretends she's what she calls her boomer mom. Boomer mom doing this, boomer mom doing that.
Yes,
And
yes,
and one is boomer mom trying to give you a box of your report cards from grade school.
yes, yes,
And
yes.
what? You don't want this?
Why don't you want that? You got an A. Look how good you did. Now look what you're doing. And it is funny. It is every single little piece of paper. And I'm in a book group with moms that are in their 40s. And I keep teasing them. I go, just throw it all out, clean it all out. And they're like, oh, we don't keep anything. And I'm like, whoa, so much better. You're going to be so much happier. But also, you really do something wise where Allie gets to see a counselor at school and she gets to talk about things with a grown up that's not family, not Annemarie, somebody else. And I thought that was so good to put in there because so many people think that's like a bad thing. In the beginning, she thinks it's a bad
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
Totally a bad thing.
Don't talk to the counselor. Everybody at school, their whole mindset is if you get sent to the counselor, it means you're cutting, you're not eating,
Mhm,
something terrible's happening. So
mhm,
everybody has the line, especially her friend Jenny, don't talk to the counselor. And in retrospect, I realized because the counselor's fantastic, Miss
mhm,
Cruz, she's one of the
mhm,
best people in the book.
mhm,
Um, that in each of my books, there's a secondary character who's one of the helping professions, who's kind of a hero, a
mhm,
nurse or a teacher. And in this book, it's definitely the school counselor who not only helps Allie and later her brother Aunt, but actually helps Bill. I mean,
mhm.
feels after listening to these 2 kids, feels like I need to talk to this man. Somebody needs to tell this man that he's making mistakes here
Mhm.
in a way that's so wonderful. I really love her. I really loved writing her.
I really felt that, she'll say the thing, no, they can't be worried about buying the shoes. You have to be worried about the shoes. You've got to take all this. This is you're putting pressure on them that should be on you and should just be taken care of. And all of a sudden he takes a step back, like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. Because he's so reliant on Annie, so reliant on her to do everything,
But
emotional.
Miss Cruz is so gentle and thoughtful with him about the whole
Mhm.
thing
Right.
that he doesn't feel attacked. I mean, he's a guy who doesn't want to feel attacked because he has the world's worst mother.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and one of the reasons he loved his wife so much is because she was a terrific mother and was loving towards him, and he hadn't had any of that growing up.
Mm-mm.
And luckily, he encounters this counselor who really is so warm and so gentle, but knows what she's talking about.
Mhm. She knows what needs to get done. And then we're talking about Allie and she's talking about Anne-Marie and she says, my mom always loved your house. Like she always thought that was so beautiful. And it was so, and they're so different in personality. But Allie's like, this is what I think my mom aspired to. But she's sitting there and Annmarie's going, but she had what she wanted. She had the 4 children. She had you. It wasn't as important, as we said before, as the kitchen or the new sofa or whatever. And I just think that Allie's getting a different perspective now, even on her mom from Annemarie, because Annmarie's going, no, 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 your mom was happy. This was all good. She said my house was nice, but that's not because she wanted to have it. She had you, you know?
Well, and that's what I think happens to a girl when her mother dies very young, that she has to learn to put together the pieces of what other people say about her mother. And that's why it's so important that they not turn her into a plaster saint, that they
Mhm.
not say nothing but good things about her.
Right.
Because you know, Allie has known her mother as a young girl, and she has to learn to know her mother as as an adult herself, and
Mhm.
maybe someday as a mother herself. And it's really important, therefore, that the stories that she hears from other people make her mother three-dimensional instead of this kind of holy card of a person.
Yeah, yeah, like, we're gonna go to the nursing home, these are the blankets she made, this is how good she was, and she's going, "But what about us? Like, just tell us about us and how she was good to us." And everybody at the funeral, everybody at the nursing home is telling her great they were to them, and she's like, "But she was great to us. Like, let me tell my story." You know, I thought it was, did this book come to you more easily than others?
Um, Parts of it, I suppose, but the interesting thing for me about it was that, my second novel was called One True Thing,
Mhm,
and it's about a professional woman in her 20s who has to come home and take care of her mother who's dying of cancer. And when I wrote that book, the daughter was very emotionally and psychologically accessible to me, and I had to work a lot harder at her very domestic mother to understand her and get under her skin. Um, and with this book, I was much more able to access Annie and Anne-Marie, the
mhm.
women, and I had to work a little bit harder to really be inside the head of a 13-year-old girl. I mean, it's been a long time since I've been a 13-year-old girl. And so that was a little more challenging to me. I actually probably thought early days that Bill was going to be more of an issue
Mm,
because as so many male writers have a very difficult time with female characters,
mhm.
uh, I think some of us who write a lot about the lives of women have some difficulty wrapping our minds around male characters. But I think because he was such a good guy, he
Mhm.
was pretty accessible to me. Allie was the hat trick for me.
Yeah, if he was like a guy on the street or a guy that, just that thought so much of himself, it would have been harder to write. But I felt like he was a guy. He was just doing his
Yeah.
job. He was there for wherever you need him. If the phone rang, he was the one that was running out the door. And it wasn't really about him all day long. Whereas if it was a character like that, it would have been a lot harder to do because he would have been harder
He's
to
just
accept it.
these are just really ordinary people, and ordinary people run the world. If you
Yes.
take all the ordinary people out of it and leave all the CEOs and movie stars, there will be nothing. You know, the plumbers and the nurses' aides rule the world.
Right.
And that's always been what I've been interested in writing. As a novelist and as a reporter, those were the stories I was interested in doing.
Yeah, one of the things I love about our website is appeals to people across the country, not just the 2 coasts. If we do an event, we usually count up the number of states at the end, and it could be 37 or 39. And I
Oh,
always
that's
joke and
great.
say, no author's going to Idaho. I mean, that's not on the trip. Like, that's not on the tour. Montana's not on the tour. Indiana's often not on the tour. And that's what I really love, is being able to bring, and also to have learned from different people through the years. We had a Christian site at one point. We had a site for kids, a site for teens. And as a result, you sort of got to know the country. You got to know what librarians were looking for, what teachers wanted. And instead of seeing what, let's say, New York is delivering, you're seeing what people want and how they want to consume that information. If that makes sense. So it's like seeing the everyday person going to a conference where a lot of people are not like you, but by the same token, They are you. They are.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. And it's like, and then you're understanding when you see somebody making a comment politically or whatever, you understand a different part of the country because you've been there. Remember, we did what first, I was doing fashion events for years, and we used to go in the South, and we couldn't do anything till 1 o'clock. And I was like, why? And they said church. And I was like, oh, got it. And there are different places in the country you go that you learn different things that you can do or not do, what's socially acceptable. There was one time we were up in Minnesota, and they were telling me that they had a line of clothes that they wanted me to push. And I called them the backwash clothes the whole time. And they were the boundary waters clothes because I was dumb enough to not know that the boundary waters were between Minnesota and Canada. Like I just didn't. And when somebody like at the third event said they're not the backwash clothes, I got it. But it also showed me that what we were showing in the magazine sometimes and what people were actually doing were two totally different things. And I don't know. I think I just learned a lot just going out and seeing America. Like I think that everybody should forget going just to Europe, go see the country, go
Well,
understand.
with all of our aspirations and our aspirational culture, I love that moment where Bill says basically, everybody is happy to see a plumber when they need one. Because
Exactly.
it couldn't be truer. I mean,
Exactly.
you can want to make a lot of money and you can want to be famous and you can want to have this job or that job. But man, when your water is cascading down a wall,
Yes.
everybody's happy to be a plumber. I mean, both of them have jobs that are real things.
They're needed.
We're a culture now that has a lot of jobs that don't seem to be real things. I was just asking my daughter what someone she knows does, and she said, I, I'm not really sure it's something in tech. How many times have I heard that somebody does something in tech?
Right.
As opposed to Annie and Bill, where Annie takes care of older people who need taken care of, and Bill takes care of toilets and sinks and drain pipes and all of the rest of it. And I think that that tells you something so important about them.
Mhm.
They do the real jobs that need to be done.
Yeah. I remember during Hurricane Sandy, my husband's an engineer and he figured how to hot wire the heat to go on. Like he could do these like wire things so you could have heat with some like a little backup generator. And we went over to one friend's house and he goes, I did the wire, the white to the white, did the whole thing. And he goes, it's not working. And my husband goes, but then you have to turn the heat on. Like it's like this other part that needs to happen. But he was like the hero because he was going to everybody's house and he goes, who knew this was going to be my best skill? Who knew? So when you sit down and write, do you have the whole story in your head or do you have like pieces? Do you do chapters and then make them come together or especially with this?
I'm somebody who starts at the beginning and goes to the end.
Right.
My second son, who's a young adult novelist, says that we're both run like hell to the end writers. But I usually only know the beginning and I have some sense of the end, but the middle is always a challenge. The
Mhm.
middle, I mean, in a way, it's exciting because the middle is where you make discoveries. The
Mhm.
middle is where you say, oh, and then that happens. Um, and it's all of it is guided always by the characters. I'm
Mhm.
a very, very character-driven novelist. It's really all I care about. Um, stylistically, my sort of way of telling a story, my turns of phrase, that was baked in a long time ago. I mean,
Mhm.
I remember when I was writing a column for the New York Times called About New York, and one of my editors said, the goal of this column is if we took your byline off, the reader would know who had written it. And I
Mhm.
was pretty clear that the readers would know when I'd written something, and that continues. That voice is particular to me. It's kind of a cul-de-sac of my personality, if you will.
Mhm.
But developing the characters is where the action is. And it's when you really know the characters that you suddenly know that they're going to go one way rather than the other.
Yeah, I feel like it's voice, and then you throw in your own tone and attitude on the rest of it because they've each got to have a voice, tone, and an attitude. And what you do with each of the characters that way, the voice is there, but how am I going to play that voice with them? what kind
Yeah.
of an attitude they're going to have to say it.
But again, that's character building. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, when you know a certain kind of character, you know what they're going to be interested in, how they're going to talk about it, you know, who they're going to hang out with. And so the character building is really where the book comes together.
Right. It's like where that's where it's going to start happening.
Yeah.
I love that it was divided by seasons. It's like winter, spring. So you feel like you're moving along and things like that. Was that always there? Or was that an editorial tweak as time went on?
It was an editorial tweak. I knew that I was going to cover the first year, but I, I, I didn't realize that it was going to break down that way until I was about halfway through.
Yeah, it just really loves. I loved it. The book is dedicated to your mom, and it feels like she was the perfect person to dedicate the book to. So was that from the start, or was it something as you were going through writing?
By the time I finished it, I thought there's nobody else I can dedicate this to.
Yeah, it's just beautiful. Just beautiful. Who sees your work first when you finish it? Do you show your son? Do you show your husband, or does it go right to your editor?
Goes right to my editor. I don't like, I mean, if I could be a working writer and never have anybody read my stuff, I'd be happy. I'm always convinced that it's not very good, that nobody's going to respond to it. So it goes right to my editor, and then she bounces it back to me for revisions.
That's great. Yeah, and then from there, one of my friends says it's like getting notes from the doctor. Are you going to live or die? Which characters have to be a little bit fixed up and things like that. And it's, yeah.
Every once in a while, I talk to a colleague who says, "Oh, I love revising. I really feel like that's where the action is, where I really get my best thoughts." And I go, "Oh my God," because I hate revising.
Yeah.
I live for the moment when Kate Medina at Random House is going to say, "The draft is perfect, Anna. Don't change a thing." And so far, it hasn't
It
happened.
hasn't happened at all. It hasn't happened. You know, how long did it take to write this book? Because there was a lot going on these last couple of years.
You know, I don't really keep track of that in precisely that way. I think maybe from beginning to end 2 years, but I couldn't swear to that.
Yeah, yeah. So then she sends you notes. You do those notes. How many times do you usually go back and forth? Two, three,
At
four?
this at this point, no, at this point, it's usually only kind of 1.5.
Wow.
She
Right.
sends pretty exhaustive notes. I would say maybe a third of them I disagree with and
Mhm.
won't do. And then the other 2/3 I do. And then she bounces it back to me one more time because a lot of times I've added or moved things
Yeah.
and they need to be smoothed out. And so that second go round is much lighter. And then usually I'm done. In the beginning I mean, this is number 10, so
Yeah.
I have a better handle on what I'm doing now.
You also have, no, she's not going to like that. So let's not do it. Like, let's not go there. Let me edit it before it gets there because it's not
Well,
going to
I can
go.
sort of hear her voice in my head because early days she said to me about, I guess, some discursive part of a book. Ask yourself, does it serve the reader?
Mhm,
And
mhm,
there are times when I write something where I really love the prose and I really love the description, and I realize that I've stopped the reader dead in her tracks. And
mhm.
it really, it doesn't serve the reader. And over, I would say like the last 3 or 4 books, there are times when I start to write and think, well, that doesn't serve the reader, and I move on to something else.
It could serve my word count for the day, but it's not going to work otherwise.
Exactly.
It's time for Netflix. It's time to do something else today. I also remember hearing or reading that you stop in the middle of a sentence when you're writing so
Yes.
that the next day you've got something to play with.
Exactly. I can't have anything that feels tied up with a bow, or the next morning I just look at it and think, well, I can't start from the beginning of a chapter. So yeah, I always stop. Never stop at the end of a paragraph either. I stop mid-sentence.
Mid sentence. Okay.
Yeah.
And then Do you make notes, like if you're making dinner and you think of something, do you just jot it down or do you keep it in your head? Like, what do you like? I don't think a book ever leaves your head completely when you get up from
Never.
the desk, ever. So you're sitting there and you're walking. If you have something else, do you just take notes? Do you make notes or?
It's funny, I was doing an event with Ann Patchett, and we were talking about the big three that look like we're doing something else when we're really composing. Driving, cooking, walking. Those are
Mhm.
the times where it looks like we're doing one activity and really we're playing out a scene in our head, we're hearing dialogue in our head, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Sometimes if I really feel like that's really good, I'll like write down a little note. And I would say probably half the time I go back to the little note and I go either, I have no idea what this means, or this is stupid. Why did I think that this was useful? Um, and some of them stick, but not that many.
I was talking to one author, I'm trying to remember who it was, and she said she was in the shower and she got an idea and there was steam and she was writing in the steam on the wall, like notes. And then she says, oh my gosh, I've got to get out of here because the steam's going to drip and there goes the idea, you know? Yeah. I write a newsletter every week and I send myself notes during the week of, because I'll never remember what I watched. I'll never remember anything. By the time Thursday night comes around, it's like the week didn't happen. So I have to send myself notes about what I did. So I have something to start from. And then there are times where I write an opener and I'll tell to my editorial director, I have nothing. Like I have nothing today. And he's like, it's going to happen. Don't worry about it. You have 2 hours. I'm like, and in 2 hours, it's going to get better. So I'm just picturing there's sometimes it's got to be sometimes when you're writing a book going, I don't know where they're going to go next, but they're going to have to go someplace.
Yep, yep.
And it'll come. So the title, was it always after Annie, which just sounds like the perfect title? I'm going to have to figure out how to get this in a good light.
No,
Yeah.
it went through many iterations of title based on, I probably shouldn't say this, but there was a lot of marketing feedback.
Okay,
Now,
got it.
after Annie was on, once the original title, which I will not evoke, was KO'd, after Annie was on my short list, and then there was a long list, and then there was another long list, and eventually somebody pivoted back to after Annie and said, oh, this is really good. And I thought, well, it was really good 3 weeks ago too.
Yeah, it's true. It's like so many cooks get in the kitchen and sometimes it's like, wait, this just really works. Like we had it. We had it. We didn't have to do any more. And then the cover, the design with the leaves, was this a cover that happened
Yeah.
immediately to match my sweater or
No,
no?
there were many iterations of covers that seemed to me to be trying to communicate. They were very pretty and they seemed to me to be trying to communicate something that was not actually in this novel. And then they sent me that one or something akin to that one, and I went, ha-cha, I mean, I love that cover. I
Gorgeous.
think it's beautiful.
Gorgeous. And it says exactly what it needs to say. It's
Yep,
exactly what it needs to say.
yep.
It's the exact story. And it's also with the leaves, it's like, this one's a little bit falling over here. The tree's not completely there, folks.
And they're willow leaves, which it's a willow branches, which are a symbol of remembrance. So
There
yeah,
you go. I'm trying to get a good
yeah,
light. There's the better light
yeah,
over here.
yeah.
It's like camera and light. It's like, I don't have the Today Show lighting. Let's just say that. So the audiobook is narrated by Jilly Messer. And did you have a hand in picking Jilly to do the book?
Yes.
Yeah.
With the audiobooks, they always send me 8 to 10 tape reels, which I can listen to on my computer of people reading the first 2 or 3 paragraphs.
Mhm.
And it's never about whether they're good readers. They always send me people who are excellent readers. It's
Yeah.
whether they suit the material. And
Right.
when I heard her reading, I thought right away that she suited the material.
Yeah, I was listening to some this morning. I was listening to a clip and it definitely has the right voice, the voice and the tone. And audio has become so big. We just did a poll last week or note to our readers, and they were talking about how much more they're reading because of audio, taking it on walks, when they're doing the dishes. My book club, many of the people listen on audio And they said because they can do things around the house at the same time and listen to the book. And
Uh-huh.
it's just so interesting because I always joke that it used to be like your rights to Finland, like it didn't really matter. It's like, oh, the audio. Yeah, it's out there someplace. But now there are a couple of authors that I've actually talked to that their audio has outsold the print, which is like amazing to hear that that's like, the kind of direction that we're going in. And I'm hearing a lot of more younger people are listening on audio because they've been so used to Spotify. They've been so used to listening all the time that they've turned to audiobooks. And I thought that's really interesting to see the younger market moving in that direction.
Podcasts are a gateway drug.
They are. They really, really. We started doing these because at the beginning when we started the company, we started in 1996. Okay, like the internet was AOL. Okay, that's where we were, and the only thing you knew about an author, what was on the back cover over here, there was nothing. Lives in San Francisco with their dog or whatever it was. You knew nothing, and the now authors have had to become like actors as well to be out on the road, doing all these kinds of things, but the idea of being able to talk to people and get their background on a book, even like someone will read this book in a year. They'll read it when it comes out in paperback. We'll refeature their interview. Somebody will find it later and find the interview at a time where you're on your next book. And there's something wonderful about that because it didn't happen before. You go on the Today Show and do 3 lines, maybe if you were lucky. You go someplace else. I saw you on CBS, it was a couple of lines, great. But it's really getting that chance to talk about the book is a new gift, I feel like, even though it's a lot of work for an author.
Well, it's not so much work for an author. I mean, come on. We're people who spend most of our lives all by ourselves in a little room with people who are completely imaginary. So when we get to actually go out into the world and talk to real people about real events, I think it's pretty liberating,
Yeah.
actually.
Like, wow, I'm actually able to go out and talk about these characters and how they end. And it's interesting because I always listen to a couple of interviews before I do mine because I want to see what people are taking away. Like every once in a while, people say, nobody's asked me that question before. And it's like, oh, I really love that moment that it's went in a different direction. Something else happened. But I like to listen to see, what authors are feeling and what they're taking away from their books from a lot of different perspectives. The more I can listen, the more I can hear more about the book because I may not come up with a question that somebody else did. And I
Well, and
think,
the other thing is,
yes,
one of the best things about going on book tour is that readers tell you things about your book that
yes,
hadn't occurred to you before.
yes, yes. I saw this and you're like, what page was that on? Where did I miss that? How did
No,
I
and
not see that?
you know, you're so in the weeds with a novel by the time you finish it that someone saying to you, I feel like the relationship between A and B mirrored this, and you go, wow. I mean, this all takes place at such an unconscious level that
Right.
when somebody pulls those kinds of threads out of your own work, it's pretty thrilling,
Mm.
actually.
Yeah. And that ability to be able to talk to people in a different kind of environment. Like we would do a lot of times we'll bring readers on and readers will ask the questions. And I love seeing what they came up with besides what we might see, what our reviewer might see. And really, it makes it for a more interesting conversation. But everything's changed because when you first started doing this, it was maybe going on book tour. And it was going on book tour to like 10 major cities, 8 major cities, something like that. But it wasn't going everywhere. And now there are book
Yeah.
festivals, this, that, the other thing that people do.
Well, and most of the publicity I'm doing now, other than book events at actual bookstores or off-site venues, most of the publicity I'm doing is podcasts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've done some radio, I've done some local television, but most of it is podcasts.
Podcasts. And it's all different perspectives on the book. They're looking for different things, different questions are coming up, etc. And I mean, I love it because there's a wealth of information out there for people to, and I'm all about if you don't read the book now, there's something later. There's
Right.
something when that author is on their next book that you can still go back and see. And you'll see what the author felt at that moment about the book instead of going later on, 4 books later. So what'd you think about After Annie when you were writing it? And you're like, let me remember those characters, let me draw them back up. So appreciate your time today. It's so much
Oh,
fun talking to
thanks.
you. It really, really was.
Oh, thanks. And thanks for reminding me about the Trulios. God, I love them.
I know it was, we have mutual friends for the rest of the audience that lived in Hoboken, and They have such great stories. We both have great stories about these people. And in this case, the woman was a very good friend of mine. And I was thinking of her as I was reading after Annie, because there's certain things that Donna is the only person that would say it that way and come back at you. And they're Donna-isms. And I was speaking with her kids, and I said, we don't ever want to forget the Donna-isms. And it's kind of a neat way to sit there and say, that's how that person got remembered. And you have the same
Exactly.
Donna-isms.
Exactly.
So thanks for joining us. I look forward to seeing you for the next book as well.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Carol.
Okay.